Hello everyone. So welcome to the module 8 and we are into the modules 8th of this week where we are going to talk about the solution design. So till module 7 we have been talking about the RPA in detail. We have seen the preparation of RPA, the complexity analysis, the no automation zone, the semi automation zone, right? So today we're going to talk about the solution design approach in RPA and where as an RPA business analyst do we stand, and what are the roles and responsibilities, the activities, the tasks, and most importantly, what are the concepts that we need to know as a part of the solution designing. All right, so let's get started. So first of all, let's understand what is solution design. Correct. So any of the IT software industry you work for, okay, any solution that gets technically designed, there is always a solution approach, a solution architecture behind every small to large scale softwares, any app that you use, any website that you access, everything at the back end has a solid solution architecture. So solution architecture, solution design or design process is an in-depth step in IT to scope and review the processes that we are currently working with, that bridges the gap and explains to us that what are the IT environments, technology, and the business need are required to have a common platform in order to deliver the maximum return on investment, and what could be the most potential and optimal solution that I can provide utilizing the technology to solve my business problem or to drive a solution. For example, let's say I need to design an application, or let's say I need to design a mobile app. Now, what eventually happens is we generally get a requirement, right? So that's something called as functional requirement for us. Now, requirements can be multiple ways. So when we talk to a business, they give us something called as requirements, right? Now these requirements can be functional, these requirements can be non-functional, correct? And those requirements also will have certain constraints that we need to evaluate, that how much that requirement is potential or how much that requirement is feasible to be developed as a solution that we can implement. All right. So requirements can be functional, requires can be non-functional. Along with, we have a constraint that we analyze, that what are the difficult or the complex parts. Is it something that we are going to achieve? Something is achievable or not? So all these things also connects with something called as software technology or software products, which also simultaneously connect with something called as hardware requirements, because we know that any solution that you're going to develop using software, there is always two things associated. The basic thing is we have an hardware component or an hardware stack. Let's say it could be my laptop, using which I'm going to use a Java program. I'm going to code into a Java environment to program something. So I would need a basic hardware, which let's say could be my laptop, but the involvement of hardware is very, very important. On top of hardware is what we have, our software stack. Now, what happens in the software stack? In the software stack, I'm going to decide the technology or the programming that I'm going to use in order to solve my problem. Now, this could be, let's say I can start coding in Java, I can start coding in Python, I can start coding in Angular, anything. I can start coding in C++, I can start coding in C as a language, I can start coding in Ruby, I can start coding in Groovy, anything. That's the language that I'm going to use on the software stack. So what generally happens in any of the requirement that we talk about is that when we understand the functional requirements, we understand the non-functional requirements, we know the need, to which we try to design a process along with my software products and my hardware products, which gives me a IT system blueprint. That, let's say if I need to design a mobile app to track my fitness, right? All the smart watches, those which are mapped with my smart, let's say Apple Watch, it's mapped with an app, correct? So there is an architecture. So what is the need? Fitness, tracking is the requirement. There could be a functional part to it, there could be a non-functional part to it, to which there are some constraints. The attributes are that I need to create a software product which is nothing but in watch. Hardware requirement is I need to create an hardware device which will have a chip, which will have a lot of processors, memories, and everything, a Wi-Fi adapter that would help me to connect. So that's all my hardware requirement. Now when I combine everything, I get a blueprint, what do you call it, as an architecture. Now there's always a blueprint or a software blueprint that tells me that this is how your solution is going to work at the back end, and comprising or pertaining to that solution, a developer starts programming to ensure that we are incorporating all the features and the feasibilities are all undercovered. So what are the stakes that are available? So this phase involves somebody who is a solution architect, someone, let's say, who is a project sponsor or who is going to design the solution process for me, or someone, let's say, who is a technical staff. Correct. So all these are the three different roles that might be involved as a part of my solution design. So what is the overall solution design that I can understand? When I map my requirements with software plus hardware component and I create an IT blueprint, that's where we understood that, okay, that's my software design. Now let's understand what is the software solution design in RPA. Now in RPA, we are doing an automation, right? We have some manual task. We are in trying to incorporate those manual tasks inside a software robot, which is going to perform all the tasks on behalf of us, correct? That's the requirement. That's the foundation to which what we do, we try to create a solution roadmap that, okay, my bot is going to run at this specific time. It is going to log into a browser, it is going to type the user ID password, it's going to click on submit button and move ahead and do this. So that's how, is a process roadmap or my functional roadmap comes into picture. Now on top of it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to assess that what's the volume that I'm going to deal with, because let's say if I'm going to process 200 million transactions, I would need a very sophisticated computer, whereas let's say if I'm processing only 10,000 transactions, I might need a lesser hardware to process that part. So those are my hardware requirements. On top of it, I'm going to decide that what are the softwares I'm going to involve with. So in a solution design in RPA, the key points is to understand that what is your requirement, what is the volume you're going to deal with, what are the process steps, what are the applications that you are going to deal with, right? So what we do as a part of the prerequisite of any solution in RPA, we're going to gather and understand the process related documents. That means what is the standard operating procedure, what is my SOP telling me, that how is it involving this tool, or this process involves SAP, involves Oracle, it involves ServiceNow, it involves Jira. What is that? What is my process roadmap is what we're going to talk in detail in the subsequent slides. The charts and the manuals. So this is the prerequisite to understand the process that I'm going to work with, to which I'm going to find a technical solution, or rather an automated solution to be implemented in RPA. Correct? Now, what is the aim for us? We're going to got a deep understanding of the process, which is very much required to create a robust solution. Document and validate the process owners as is flow and all the relevant data. Now, what is as is flow? A very, very important. We're going to see a couple of diagrams in the coming slides. Now, what is an as is flow? As is nothing but my current manual process or existing process, whatever I have, is what we call it as is flow. That right now, before automation, what I have is what we call it as is flow. Now we have to do this as is flow. Now let's say I have a process where I open Microsoft Excel, I copy some data, I do some data cleaning, and I create a final report, I send out an email. That's my process. Now manually I do these 4 or 5 steps on a daily basis. That's my as is flow. Now to this as is flow, whenever I require an automation, I need to create something called as to be process flow. Now what is to be process flow? To be process flow tells me that to this manual process, how exactly is going to my solution or my automation is going to work. Then a good documentation is always required to be created in order to understand that what my solution is effectively doing. All right, so that's the prerequisite, that's the aim. Now let's understand about the roadmap approach. Now solution design is not typically done by a business analyst. Solution design is typically done by a solution architect, considering the process documentation or the PDD that the business analyst has created. Correct. So now let's see what are the each steps as a roadmap that we are going to deal with. First of all, we need to organize a discussion with the process owner. Now the first discussion is to understand that what my requirement is, what automation I'm going to deal with, what is this process involves eventually. That's my step one, right? Then obtain high level process description. Now here I am understanding that what does my process tell. Is it a reporting process? Is it an email automation? Is it a citrix process? What is exactly required, I understand from here. Step 3 is understand the process complexity and challenges. As we already learned in the RPA, that how do we do a complexity analysis? What could be the challenges that I have? That means if something is going to be in scope for me, and what are the things that are going to be out of scope for me? All these things I need to understand. Correct? Then in step 4, capture the process metrics. Now every process has its own metrics. You know that what do you mean by metrics? That let's say I'm dealing with a process where I need to transact 10,000 data every day. I need to send out 2,000 emails to different stakeholders. I need to do a data cleansing and publish 3 4 reports. So these are my project metrics, which works on certain KPIs. What are KPIs? Key parameter index, on which my process is eventually held up, right? To this, then we create the necessary documentation that we understood this is the process, everything is done. Now we need to create a process documentation that would tell us that these are all the individual steps of the process. This is what we're going to do. So eventually the PDD creation, right? Eventually the PDD creation. There's one more step what we can add is called as process recordings. What happens is at times we do an end to end recording of the process that we are trying to automate. End to end recording that explains me that this is the starting point, this is the ending point, and these are the various scenarios I'm covering. So a recording of the process gives the developers or the business analyst a better idea to understand that what exactly the process involves at a keystroke level, right from a mouse click to a file upload. And then we go for logging the reasons for automation potentiality. Here we do to understand the quadrant analysis, whether it is no automation potential, semi automation potential, 100% automation potential, or 100% automation potential with a high cost. Correct? So all these analyses are done pertaining to this. So that's the roadmap. Now let's look at the different stages of process documentation. Correct. Now when we do a detailed process documentation, what we need to understand, because these are the ones which are effectively going to be used for my solution design. So we know that we are going to deal with all the requirements analysis, right? We are going to deal with gathering all the process data and information. We're going to create a process high level map which process description in it. We're going to validate all the process high level map with the process owner. Now this is very very important. So what are the requirements we are creating or we are gathering, that we need to get it validated as well from the concerned SME, right? Now then we're going to go ahead and update all the documents by including more scenarios in business rules. Now let's say I'm first of all dealing with a very normal process. Now to every process I will have scenarios, I will have business rules. So I need to probe, understand, and make necessary adjustments or amendments rather to all the scenarios and business rules are covered in my entire process documentation. Now from this portion is what we this is what we have already understood in our previous sessions. Now from here is what you're going to learn today. So after all these are done, we're going to have a process map developed, which is a detailed roadmap of an as is process, to which I will have a detailed roadmap of my to be process solution, that end to end how my automation is going to work technically. Then we're going to create a complete PDD and roadmap and supporting materials. PDD is already created for us. We're going to create all the supporting materials with the business rules, that how my automation is eventually working after my to be process is created, right? And then we're going to do all the validations and updation of my PDD, of my solution design document, everything, if there is any updation required. Now what happens is, at times when we create a solution to the previous process diagram or as is flow, whatever we have created as a process definition document, there might be a little change. Because while designing the solution, we would have understood that, this is what is not possible. Rather, we can do it instead in this way. And once the client agrees to that new modification or amendment, we go back to the PDD and modify the PDD, so that we are documenting the new approach, what we are exactly going to do. And all these that we're going to do here, as far as we have already spoken about, we are going to get a client sign off, a sign off from the client. A client sign off is very, very important here. Yeah. So now let's try to understand that we all know that we are going to do a requirements gathering. Now, after it, today we will see that high level process map, how we are creating. Then this process map needs to be reviewed. This process map needs to include all the scenarios and the business rules. Again, we're going to review. So if you see here, review is a step that is getting repeated. Why? Because every amendment or every progress that we make in the solution design, it is very, very important that we get it reviewed. Why? Because we don't want to be in a scenario where the requirement was something and the solution that is designed is something, right? So peer reviews, client reviews, everything is very, very important, because if it is reviewed properly, we understand that we are all the same page, and whatever is my requirement, I am having a complaint, I am having a complete detailed solution to my requirement. I'm not moving here and there. Yeah. Then after my as is process solution is done, process map is done, review is done, I'm going to get interest into my to be process solutioning, to which I will also have my possible roadmaps. I will create my to be process solution of the as is process, and then finally I'm going to update my PDD. If there are any feedback, I'm going to update it. If there are any implementation document that needs to be created, I'm going to create it, and then finally I'm going to get the sign off. So to all the documentations, to any documentation that you create, getting a sign off from the corresponding stakeholder is an utmost priority or requirement, so that everything is transparent and documented. Okay. Now to this, we're going to understand that what are the requirements gathering approach, or what are the parameters on which we are going to do the requirements gathering. So the parameters on which we are going to do the requirements gathering, first of all, is on the process metrics. As I already explained, that what is the volume, we already understood the volumetric approach in order to understand the complexity, that whether I have a high volume in my monthly, in quarterly, how is my volume impacted, what is the process average handling time, how much does a human take to manually process each transaction, to manually process each transaction, total FTE involved in the process, right? That means how many people are right now working as a part of the process. So that's what is my process metrics to which I'm interested. Correct. Second parameter that we need to look into, the process level information. Yes, all the open and close items, time dependencies, and SLAs. So what are the open items, what are the close items to this process, what are the time dependencies? Let's say certain processes involves that they send something for an approval, and there are 2 business days that the process or the team members need to wait for getting the approval, and then they are going to move ahead. So there is a time duration, there is a dependency. SLA is service level agreement. Let's say I talk to client, I have an agreement with my client that I'm going to complete all my transactions that I received today within 48 hours. So that's what is called a service level agreement, right? Expected increase in transaction volume, stakeholders involved and their roles, inputs and outputs, very, very important, whether it is structured or unstructured. See, all these things we have understood some portion of it in our previous modules. But right now, what we are trying to do here is we're trying to sum up all the learnings as a part of my requirements gathering, to understand that, okay, this is what I've learned before, and this is where I need to exactly apply it, and this is how I'm going to apply it, and this is what is the benefit I'm going to get out of it, right? So this is what is my input type and output type, whether my input is structured or unstructured, what is going to be my output, and what is going to be my output type. Am I going to send out an email as my final output? Am I going to download a report as my final output? Am I going to create a dashboard as my final output? Correct. So all these are my process level information. What is my infrastructure requirement? Very, very important. No software or automation cannot run without any infrastructure. I would need systems. I would need my hardwares. Let's say even if the bot is running on my laptop, which is a normal computer device, that is also an infrastructure requirement. Correct. Eventually the bots are deployed on server. Cloud technologies are involved. So that is what is my infrastructure requirement. If I have a plan of running 100 bots across my organization, I cannot run them on my laptops. I need a definite cloud computing service, right? I need to scale my RPA. Whenever I think of scaling my RPA, I need to know, I definitely know that I gonna need the cloud architecture or the cloud servers to deploy my solution. I cannot have local PCs and deploy 100 bots. Doesn't make sense from a technical standpoint, right? So that's my infrastructure requirement, where we have test environment availability. What is testing? Now, whenever you create a software, there is always recommended that the software is first developed in the test environment. Similarly, when you develop an RPA robot, after the development, the developer takes the robot code into a testing environment. Testing environment is nothing but it's a pure play replica of a production environment, but not a production environment. Whatever is my production environment, let's say I have two systems. Okay, I have two systems. This is my test environment and this is my prod environment. What is a production is my live system where my codes are running on a real-time basis. Let's say Facebook that you are accessing, facebook.com, is you hit the URLs. That is the live system where people are interacting. What is testing environment? A replica of the production environment, so that I can do all my R&D, research and development work, so that if there are any bug, I can fix it. Okay. We also need to understand that if we are going to develop with UiPath as a platform, then my solution, starting from my solution to my architecture to my deployment, everything needs to comply with this UiPath hardware software requirement. Now UiPath as a platform has its own software and hardware requirements, so that also we need to understand from a technical standpoint. Then what we need to understand in our requirements gathering, the next parameter is the applications used. Now what are the applications used? Let's say in my process right now I'm using ERP is my Oracle, I'm using Microsoft Excel to process the data, I'm going to use Microsoft's Outlook to send out an email. So these are the three applications that are involved in my process. So capture all the applications that are used in the process. Very, very important. Understand and capture the underlying technology. Now, let's say I'm going to post data into a web portal. My bot is accountable to store copy data and post it into some website. Now we need to understand that what is the underlying technology of that website. Is it a .NET framework application? Is it a Java application? Is it a Python application? What is it? We need to understand the underlying technology at times, so that if there are any application level dependency, we can handle it. What are the different instances of one application if applicable? Let's say mainframe. Now mainframe is considered as a very old and legacy application. Okay, mainframe is considered as a very old and legacy application where everything runs at a very decent pace. So mainframe solutions in RPA are always a little bit of a pain point from a solutioning standpoint, because it is a legacy application. Robustness is not there. So this is where we are understanding all our applications approach. Thin or thick client, this is where my VDI comes into picture, my virtual desktop interface. Like if I require to connect to a remote machine, let's say I have a cloud where I have a server and this is my computer, and if I need to connect, I need to have a virtual desktop interface, or what we call it as VDI, or a remote desktop connection to connect to that remote PC, because that remote PC is not connected to me locally, it's somewhere in the cloud, right? So what is a thin client? Is computer, let's say, what is a thin client computer? A computer which does not have any storage. It just has the operating system, and it will have your Citrix or Microsoft remote desktop service, where you will enter your credentials to log into a remote computer. The computer locally will not be accountable to store anything. That's one is a thin client. What is a thick client? A normal desktop that we have, a desktop PC, a laptop that we have, is what is called as a thick client, right? So if there is such involvement of that, we need to evaluate all the parameters there as well from a solution designing standpoint. Now let's understand what is the high level design process, or what is a high level process map. We are already speaking about as is process, correct? We are already speaking about to be process. Now, as I said earlier, as is process is nothing but a replica or a flow diagram of how my process is today when it is being executed manually. All right. What is my to be process? To this manual process, whenever I bring an automation solution, and how the automation is exactly going to work, that's what is defined as a to be process. All right. So if we see this specific process that we have in this diagram, so let's say the as is process is a process where I need to open an email and a PO. PO is nothing but an invoice, which is PO stands for purchase order. Okay. So let's say I need to open up an invoice that I've received from a client, which is attached in an email. The application involving is Outlook. Okay. That's my application used. And opening up the email and the attachment is my step or task. Second, check product code. Let's say I'm doing it using a desktop based application, Outlook desktop application. Open the ERP and select the transaction. Now, let's say after I read the invoice, I need to copy certain information and let's say post it back into an ERP, which is let's say an Oracle. Okay. So the data that I've received from an Outlook mail email attachment, I am now copying certain information from the invoice and posting it back to my ERP system. Now in the ERP, I need to definitely fill in the data. Whatever, let's say from the invoice, I'm copying the invoice number. I'm copying the date. I'm going to capture the amount. So all these are the filling information from the invoice that I'm going to enter into the ERP. After that, I'm going to get it generated and validated by SO. Any system operator, let's say, is going to validate all the transactions that has been entered using a desktop ERP application. And then after the validation is done, we're going to reply back to the vendor attaching this, to this purchase order that I have received. Now I have generated a system order. Okay. So let's say this was an order. Someone wanted to buy 100 computers from me. Right. So from the invoice, I know what is the invoice number, the amount that the guy is involving, this amount involved, the date, the quantity of computers, everything that I have entered into my ERP. Now in my ERP, I have validated everything and I am creating an invoice, a bill, right? That this is how, what is the complete delivery invoice that is considering, that is having the date, the amount, that when I'm going to deliver all the PCs, everything is there, right? I am attaching this system order back into the Outlook email and sending it to the sender who has sent it to me. So that's an overall a typical PO process, right? You receive an order through an email, you understand what is the order from the invoice, you enter the details in the ERP, you make a system entry, you generate the receipt, you send it out. To this as is process. Now what are these 2 minutes, 3 minutes? So if you see, this black boxes indicates AHT, average handling time, that how much time do I manually need to open out an email and download the purchase order. 2 minutes. To check the product code, what is the product code for which the order has been placed, I need 1 minute. To open the ERP Oracle application and select that transaction where I'm going to upload the data, I need 2 minutes. For filling in all the information, I need 10 minutes. To generate and validate the SO in the application, I need 2 minutes. And then to reply back with the attachment, I need another 4 minutes. So see, this is the end-to-end time duration that I need to complete this process manually. Right? So I am taking, how much time I'm taking? 2 plus 1, 3. 3 minutes, 3 plus 2, 5 minutes, 5 plus 10, 15 minutes, 15 plus 2, 17 minutes, and then 17 plus 4, almost 21 minutes is my AHT for one single process or invoice. Now, if I am receiving 100 invoices, 21 minutes multiplied by 100 is my total duration, right? Now, if I do an automation of this manual process, I need to know the to be process. So it's a very high level. So if you see here right now, since it's a manual process, you can see that we have a human icon. So all these steps involves a human. It's a user, right? Here you see the to be process. Now I'm saying this is going to be done by a robot. So I'm denoting it with a robot icon. So now opening an email and reading a PO, the process remains same, the application remains same. See, it takes 2 minutes manually. Now there is a reduction in the time if it is done by a bot to 1 minute. Now we calculated this was overall 21 minutes, correct? That was required. Now let's see. Now to check the product code in the desktop application, human needs 1 minute, bot also needs 1 minute. Okay. Open the ERP and select the transaction, right? That means 2 minutes was required. Here I'm taking a minute less, bot is taking 1 minute. To fill the entire data into the ERP screen, I needed 10 minutes. See the amount now. Bot is taking only 2 minutes, a drastic reduction of 8 minutes then and there, right? Generate and validate SO bot. Human takes 2 minutes, bot takes 1 minute. Again, a reduction in a minute. Here to send out the email, I take 4 minutes, where a bot eventually would take 2 minutes. So we calculated a time frame, an AHT of 21 minutes manually. Now let's say if I do it through an automation, how much is it? 1 plus 1, 2 plus 1, 3, 3 plus 2, 5 minutes, 5 plus 1, 6 minutes, 6 plus 2, 8 minutes. 8 minutes is my bot's AHT to complete the same process, whereas a human takes 21 minutes. Majority of the chunk of the time goes here in manual filling or data entry, where the bot can do it super fast within 2 minutes. Now if you try to understand that a process which takes 21 minutes manually is now being reduced to 8 minutes using a bot, what is the difference? That much amount of time I'm able to save for one single transaction, you know. So that means roughly 21 minus 8, 21 subtracted by 13 minutes I'm going to save in each process, each invoice that I receive. So as I said, 21 minutes into 100 invoices if I receive every day, that means 2100 minutes. If the same 100 invoices are now getting processed in 8 minutes, the what can complete the work in 800 minutes. That means a 1300 minutes difference of time frame. In that duration, I can use the same bot to do something else, correct? So that's the benefit of an RPA we need to understand, in just in terms of my time duration as a parameter. Now we have been talking about high level process of as is and to be. Now we need to also understand that what does the in-depth process looks like. What is the in-depth architecture of my to be process? What is the in-depth roadmap of my as is process flow? Okay, so to this, what are we going to do? So if you see, all the blue boxes that we are indicating is a manual step, and all the red boxes or the orange boxes we're going to see are the automated step. Now in as is process, everything is manual. I don't have any automation here because this is the pre-automation scenario. So let's say if I am taking a similar process which we spoke about in this high level design diagram at a very high level. Now let's look at the same process in detail. So how does it happen? So I have three applications involved. One is an Outlook, one is my desktop application, and another is my ERP, correct? So the same process in a detailed way. So we are starting. What is the process? I'm opening a mail. To that mail, I am downloading the attachment that I have in my mail, correct? After this, I will open the invoice and I will check in the invoice that whether I have the product code present. Now every company has their product code, right? Let's say Apple is selling iPhone 13. Apple will have a product code for iPhone 13, iPhone 12, Apple Watch 5, iPad Pro Max, right? So they will have different product codes to identify each of the products. So what is the task here? The operations guy or the analyst who is working will open up the invoice. They will read the invoice with the product code, whether it is present or not. Now to this, I can have two scenarios, right? So that's why it's a decision box for me. I can have a product code in my invoice. or I cannot have any product code. Let's say scenario can be two. One is product code is present. Let's say some invoice, the faulty invoices where the product code is absent. So this is where my business exception comes into picture. So this is what is a BI, business exception for me. That what if the product code is not there? So if the product code is present, what we're going to do? We're going to follow the yes path. If the product code is not present, we are going to follow the no path. Correct? So that's the two scenarios. Now in yes path, what I'm going to do? If I find that the product code is available, I'm going to log into the ERP application. Okay. Then I'm going to select the appropriate ERP transaction, which is having my sales details for this product code, for this purchase order. I'm going to type in all the details that are required in to fill in from the invoice. Let's say it could be the organization, the division, the channel. Then I'm going to add more information to it. Let's say I need to understand, I need to fill in to whom I'm selling it, what is the sold to address, what is the ship to address, what is the PO number, what is the material code quantity, what is the product details, everything I'm entering. And once I'm entering, I'm generating something called as sales order. That means to my purchase order that I have received, I'm now able to generate a sales order in my company's ERP system. After my sales order is created, I'm going to validate that everything in the sales order are correct. That's a checkpoint for me in the manual process. Correct. Someone is validating that I've entered all the details correctly in these two steps from the invoice that I have downloaded here. Okay. And then I'm going to reply back to the same mail that I have received with the attachment, which is my sales order details. Let's say I'm going to say, hi, we have received your purchase order. This is the corresponding sales order. Please find the attachment. Let's say that's the mail I'm going to reply as an analyst, right? Then I'm going to move this email that I have received to the processed folder from my inbox so that I don't confuse and my process stops here. So this is the detailed process, or what is called as a detailed as is roadmap. So see how detailed it is here and how high level it was here. Here we did not speak anything about my business exceptions, but here when I go into a detailed roadmap, I'm talking about my business exceptions because I understand that, I can have a product code present so that I follow the yes path. I can have a product code not present so that I follow the no path. Now let's see if the invoice that I have received or the PO that I have received does not have the product code. What I'm going to do? If the product code is not there, the analyst manually, what does the analyst do? The analyst opens some master data file. So every company has their master database, which explains all their products and all their product codes. Let's say if Apple as a company will have a database where it will have all its products listed and what are the corresponding product codes that the Apple uses. So if the product code is not available, you need to refer it to somewhere. It's a manual business exception. So the analyst is going to open up a new database where it will see the product number or the name and try to find the product code from the database. That means look up for the product description. Now let's say if the invoice says iPhone 13, that's my product description. Now I'm going to search what is the corresponding product code of iPhone 13, correct? Then if I find a match, right? Let's say iPhone 13 is there in the database. I find the product code. What I'm going to do, I'm going to get the product code, right? And I'm going to follow the same step again connecting to here. That means, see, just because a product code was missing, I had to do 3 steps additional, 1, 2, 3. Just because one of the business exception was product code is not there. If the product code would have been mentioned, I would not have gone to this no path, correct? Now, the moment I got the product code, I need to come back to my original process flow and start the same process till here, right? Now, here again, I have a deviation that when I'm looking for a product in the database, I can have a match, I cannot have a match. Let's say this was an invoice from Apple for its iPhone as a product, right? iPhone as a product. Now, what happened is incorrectly, I have opened a database of not iPhone, but Apple Watch. Now, the database of Apple Watch will never have an iPhone product description. Apple Watch database will have the description of the product of Apple Watch Series 1, Apple Watch Series 2. If I go to an Apple Watch repository and search for iPhone 13, I'll not get a match. So in case, this could be one. Second is, let's say the product that I have got is not at all from Apple. Let's say I have received a product of Google Home, and I'm trying to search it in an Apple database because the invoice that came to me was wrong. That's not an Apple product. That means in this case, when I do a search, either I'll find a match if it's an Apple product. If it's not an Apple product, I'll not find a match. So if I do not find a match, let's say I as a company sell only Apple products. Now you have given me a purchase request that please sell 100 iPhone devices, but the invoice that you have sent me mentions Google's Android phone, let's say Google Nexus. Right now, what I'm going to do, I am not going to find a match because I don't sell Google Nexus. So what I'm going to do in that case, if I do not find a match, I'm going to reply back to you stating, hey, I think the invoice that you have sent is incorrect product description. I need to notify the sender, right, that please send us with an Apple description because we only sell Apple products. And then my process ends here. So imagine when you go and try to analyze a process, what level of complexity or what level of detailness you need. So how many exceptions I have jot down here? One exception could be here. Whether I have a product match, I do not have a product match. Again, another exception was whether I have a match found, I do not have a match found. Correct. So this is my business exception BE1, and this is my business exception BE2 in this specific process of a purchase order to converting it to a sales order, right? So this is my as is process. Now let's understand that to that as is process, what's going to be my to be process. That means how I am technically going to solution it. Similarly, I'm having Outlook as one application, my desktop and my ERP, that remains same. There's no change to it. Okay. All right. So these are the same scenarios. Now I have the process where it is starting. Now, instead of a human, the bot is going to read the email from my Outlook. So I'm saying all the blue boxes has been now converted to red boxes are the steps where I'm going to automate. Okay. So see, here I still see there's one blue box. That means this process has one manual step for some reason. Now, the bot is going to open up the mail. The bot is going to download the attachment from the mail by itself. Again, it's in red box, and it is going to read the information from the invoice. Now, when you are reading, it's easy. It's a human being. Now, when bot reads it, I need to understand couple of other approaches, that whether the details in the invoice or the attachment are structured or not. Because I need to tell the bot that, whenever you are dealing with an invoice, if this is the body of the invoice, this is where is your invoice number, this is where is your date, this is where is your amount, this is where is your product code. I need to specify the places for the bot to fetch that specific information for me. Right. So in that case, what I'm going to do, I'm going to understand that whether the structure of the invoice is the input that I'm going to give it to the bot is structured or not. Correct. So if it is a structured input, I can code it. I can program it and pass it on to the bot. But what if it's not a structured input? Let's say sometimes in the invoice that they send, sometimes the invoice number is here at the top, sometimes the invoice number is here at the bottom. I cannot automate such unstructured template because I need to tell the bot exactly from where it needs to read what. Such unstructured data is not potentially automation potential. All right. So if the input is unstructured, I'm going to say that this needs to be done manually. Automation is not potential. And then my process is going to end because we're going to follow the manual path of this invoice. Now, if the process says that input is structured, then what I'm going to happen is I'm going to send email to upload the file. Correct. So what I'm going to say is, sorry, so I'm going to just remove this. Yeah. So if my input is structured, I'm going to follow this path and come here. I'm going to apply something called as OCR to extract the data. Now, what is OCR? OCR is a technology that is required to read data from invoices like image. Let's say I have a photo and I have a text. Okay, so if I need to extract the text from a photo, I generally apply a technology called as OCR, where OCR stands for optical character recognition. So that technology needs to be applied to understand that this is the invoice copy that I have, and OCR will help me to parse the data from that invoice. Okay, that's it. That's a to be process step. This process is not there in your as is. All right. Then after the data extraction is done, I'm going to look for the product code. Again, I have two steps here. So I need to understand whether the invoice had product code or not. If the invoice had product code, yes, I'm going to follow the same process, ERP login. The bot is going to upload all the data, all the information, generate the sales order, validate the sales order by itself, and then reply back to the email and move the mail to the process. The process ends. Similar to how the manual process was done. Now, if the product code is not there, then I need to tell the bot that, you know what, you need to go to this master database. You need to look up for the product description and check if there is a match or not. If there is a match, you get the product code and follow the same step. If there is no product code, please send an email to the vendor and go and end the process. So that means whatever I understood as a part of the to be process, everything is similar, but I had some additional checkpoint. One is this, where I'm applying an additional technology to read. Okay, this is where I'm handling one of my business exception for the bot, another business exception to the bot, correct, and another exception which is a structured or not, because if my input is not structured, it's not going to help me out. Correct. So this is a detailed automated solution to my manual process. All right. Now, let's see what are the process documentation and tools that we need. Eventually, we have already understood that we need to document everything at a keystroke level. Right from each click, what is required, everything needs to be captured. Process recording is an additional advantage for us. If I get a video recording of the end-to-end process, it helps the business analyst or the technical architects to review the solution, to review the process and design the solution, and then business logic translational table. So either, this is optional at times, this is required if you are dealing with a lot of critical projects, your business rules are very dynamic, then you might need to create a table where you need to map, else this is not required. Then what are the documentations we're going to create? As I'm repeatedly saying, that your PDD needs to be created, to which you're going to have all the information. Then you're going to get the PDD sign off done from the client, where you will be explaining the PDD, hand it over to the business owner and the development team post the approval from all the stakeholders. Correct. And the step 3 is maintain the PDD, because in the duration of your robot development life cycle, RDLC, there could be some enhancements, modifications that is happening. So you have to ensure that you are timely maintaining and updating your PDD, and if required, you need to resend it back for a further approval if there are major enhancements. That's why I suggest that it is very, very important that whenever you are creating a PDD, ensure you do something called as version controlling. Version controlling means, let's say I create the first draft, I'm going to say this is the PDD underscore version 1.0, so that I understand this is my version 1 and first draft. If there are any amendments to it, I'm going to rename the file as PDD underscore version 1.1. So I'm also having a backup of my old copy. I'm also having the enhancement done here. So if I need to revert back at times to understand that, okay, what was the initial thing and what I changed or what are the modifications happened, I have both the documents sidewise to tally. Correct. So that's why version controlling is very, very important in such cases where we need to understand that this is what is going to happen. All right. Now, with this, I'm going to conclude, but I'm going to explain you the assignment here, that what is the assignment that you need to do. This is an hands-on assignment, not much of a theory, but we are getting so whatever we have explained here as a part of the to be process, as is process diagram in detail, this is another process which is explained here. It's an ERP managed process, what we call it as procure to pay. So this diagram shows you, it's a high level as is process diagram. This is an high level as is process diagram. Okay, it explains an as is process to which you need to create a detailed as is process map. That means what I'm giving you here is this. Okay, what you need to create as a part of your assignment is this. Okay, so let's review the question and understand the scenario. All right, so what are the ERP process involving? I am having an ERP which has master data. It has attributes like accounts. Okay, it has attributes like accounts, suppliers, users, information. Okay, I have a process that I follow here. These are my eventual tasks or process steps, and these are my, so three involvement. One is an application level ERP, another is my supplier, and these are the tasks that I am having, right? So my information or my input is coming from an ERP. Let's say I am getting a requisition order. Instead of PO, it is an RO. Okay, so that means I'm getting a requisition order for creating a PO, a step ahead, right? So similarly with this requisition, I have to create a purchase order. This purchase order needs to then go to the supplier. The supplier receives the purchase order that I have created. It generates an invoice. Okay, so you are creating the purchase order, sending it to the supplier as a receipt. The supplier is receiving that purchase order receipt, creating an invoice and sending the invoice back to you. You have received the invoice, you are checking the invoice in detail, and then you are okay to create a pay. Okay to pay invoice. That means if I billed you for $20,000, you as a company is now okay to pay me $20,000. So okay to pay. So you are validating it. Then you are paying me the invoice amount. You are initiating the payment. I am confirming you that the payment is received. So this is a very high level process where I have couple of steps. I have some master data information utilizing which I'm receiving a requisition, let's say over an email. You can consider it as an Outlook as an email. Okay, to which you need to create a purchase order in an ERP system. Then the purchase order would generate, supply me the purchase order as a copy, as a receipt. The moment I receive this receipt, I'm going to create an invoice. I'm going to send the invoice back to you. You're going to validate the invoice that everything is okay. You agree to pay if everything is okay. Here you might need to indulge a scenario. What if the invoice is not okay? That could be an exception which you need to add. I'm just giving you a hint. So if everything is okay, you're going to make a pay. The payment is initiated and the supplier receives the payment. Correct. So that's an end-to-end procure to pay process which you need to create, utilize, and create a detailed as is process. This is a high level process, right? So with this I'll stop. Thank you.